Welcome, Pewter Report readers, listeners, and viewers to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast, Energized by Celsius. I am John Ledyard from pewterreport.com. With me today on the show is the one and only, the illustrious, the affable Scott Reynolds on the show today to talk about the Bucs against the Texans. Is it the rare preseason game that might actually matter in the end? We'll discuss that.
It's going to matter for that guy right there on the screen,
That's
John.
right.
O.J. Howard.
You're right about that, Scott. He is probably the game's probably more important for O.J. Howard than any other player on the Bucs offense, I would say at this point. Not in terms of making the roster, but in terms of what can happen this season. What's the ceiling here? Is this guy going to get right before the regular season rolls around, or is he going to be playing catch up when they hit week one? There'll be a lot of that to discuss and a lot of other positional matchups to watch in this game as well.
For sure. And I think with OJ, it's going to come down to, is he going to be tight end 3 or tight end 2 this year behind Cam Brate? Because they know what they have in Cam. Cam has got some limitations, but he's consistently gets open, consistently catches the ball. And that's been a problem with OJ. I mean, throughout practices, throughout the games, it's been some drops. Right. And it was nice to see him end on a high note. I think he caught the last 3 pass attempts thrown his way, but how's he going to fare with Tom Brady throwing the ball? How's he going to fare with the starters in this lineup here? Right. And blocking too, he was not great blocking. Gave up a sack. Wasn't stout in the run game. This is a big year for O.J. Howard. I know it's a mental thing right now with him with the Achilles. He's got to get over that quickly. Otherwise, it cost him a lot of money.
You're absolutely right. There's no question. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about this running back. I wouldn't even say the battle between the two, but just how both guys, I think Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette, have some important moments coming up for them. Tom Brady, and the one limitation that the Bucs offense could face that I am a little bit wary of. I talked about it a little bit last year. We'll talk about it more on today's show as well. And just what we think about what needs to happen on Saturday, because there's a lot that I would like to see happen, and I'm curious to see the kind of energy the Bucs come into that game with against the Texans on Saturday. Yes, energy, Scott. Do you know where they could get some if they don't have some?
Yes, I most certainly do. From our great friends at Celsius. John, I'm rocking the orange today. I told everybody in the podcast yesterday I did the smart thing. I went to Celsius.com and I looked at all the flavors and I said, which is my favorite? Because I like the tropical vibe. I like the Fuji apple pear. I love the grape. But I haven't had an orange in a while because I just ran out. So I went to Amazon.com, clicked on the subscribe and save, and I saved 5% on my order. And I've got that replenishment coming now about every 3 weeks, which is probably not soon enough. But I've got some coming. So I had a big case ordered on Sunday. It came, and I've been mowing through this orange flavored Celsius. I like it because it tastes like a soft drink, but it's not a soft drink. It's just an energy drink without sugar, and that means no crash. So with other energy drinks, you get that buzz going. You wake up. The problem is a couple hours later, you have that sugar crash. That does not happen with Celsius. I can't have coffee anymore, but Celsius is basically, I can't have orange juice either. That's the damn thing. Those are the 2 big breakfast beverages. Yeah. Now for me, it's Celsius. It's the best of both worlds. I get the wake up that I need plus that orange flavor I love.
Yeah, I got the Fuji apple pear today, and I'm loving it. It's great stuff. And if you don't know, check out the fast protein bars from Celsius too. This is the salted caramel peanut crunch. They are unbelievable. We got a box of these ones and the white chocolate cookies and cream. My wife has already eaten about half of the box of these ones. I don't know if she's eating anything else these days, but she's eating these because they're so good. They're good for you with 20 grams of protein. 2 grams of sugar in this one. And so check them out. Try them. There's a link in the YouTube description. You can place your order, get the variety pack, get 2 of those, 2 different flavors of those protein bars, and make yourself healthier, man, with Celsius. It's great stuff.
Yes. Now, listen, we had a big deal yesterday, and I really want to thank Pewter Nation out there for coming through, our loyal subscribers to Pewter Reports. And when I mean loyal subscribers to Pewter Report TV, I mean over 5,000 of you. Thank you so much for hitting 5,000 subscribers for us yesterday. It was great. We picked up around, I think, the 20 yesterday, 12 during the show that we needed to get over the 5,000 mark. That was awesome. Thank you guys so much for that. So I'd say yes. We went over 5,000. Yes, it's not just John and I. It's not just Matt and JC. It's you guys too. This is your show just as much as it is us. Why? Because we all love talking about the Buccaneers.
Absolutely. And y'all have done a great job of spreading the word and getting people to subscribe. So the next goal is 10,000.
That's right.
Help us get there. We're going to have a lot of opportunities to get there by the end of the year. It's going to be a great, fun season covering the Bucs, obviously. So we appreciate y'all. All right, let's talk about this matchup a little bit coming in. Tony Saylor with the $5 super chat. We greatly appreciate that, Tony. Bucs starters need at least 4 scoring drives against Lovey's cover no one defense.
Oh,
can't wait for Saturday night. Let me just pose this question back to you, Scott. What do you walk away from feeling satisfied with? I mean, we are talking about the Bucs Super Bowl favorite against the Texans. Chance they go 0-16. I know it's the preseason, but I know there's not a lot of game planning, but we're still talking about a huge talent disparity that I'll talk about more in a second.
Yeah, I'd like to see a lot of touchdowns scored on Lovie Smith's defense. So the funny thing is, listen, this is just part of the job, right? I have to call it like I see it. My job is not to be friendly with anybody in the Bucs organization, although I have been. I've got very good relationships with a ton of people in the organization. That's just what happens with, when you have good credibility and you've been around for 26 years like I have, you build those relationships. And sometimes you say things, John, and you report things, and sometimes people block you on Twitter. Not going to name any names. Just happened yesterday. But
never happened.
But if Gerald McCoy blocked us, I think we're still blocked. But I'm talking about somebody more recent. But my point is with Lovie Smith, I was the first one to call for him to be fired. And that happened early in his last season, which was 2015. He only had 2 seasons. The infamous 2-14 season in 2014. And then where they go 7-9 or so 6-10 the next year. Well, they went on the road to Washington. And they got killed by the Washington football team. Back then it was the Redskins, but the Washington football team. And Kirk Cousins, that was the, what do you say? You like me or whatever his catchphrase was.
You like that?
You like that? Yeah, exactly. Because they came roaring back in that game. The Bucs jumped out to a huge lead, but Lovie Smith's predictable cover 2 defense ended up costing him big time. So I'd love to see a lot of touchdowns scored on Lovie Smith's defense. Nothing personal. It's just that he gave me the biggest cold shoulder ever since I called for him to be fired. And I understand that. Like, I'm not upset by that. It comes with the territory. But, we stuck our neck out and said, sorry, like this is not going to get any better. You need to go. Right. And if you remember, that was like October. So I had to put up with Lovie Smith for 2 years of glaring at me in the press conferences, not taking my questions, being snide when he did. Not my favorite head coach. By the way,
I was actually going to ask you, not to get off on a total Lovey sidetrack here, but I did want to look, of all the coaches you've covered that have coached the Bucs, they had a run there where there were some bad ones. Do you think he was the worst?
Yes. No, there's no doubt.
No question.
No doubt. Yeah.
Wow. And this is including Shiano.
Yes.
Who else is? I'm forgetting others, but
Raheem Morris. Morris, Dirk Cutter. Yeah. But Lovey was the worst.
Lovey was the worst. All right. Yeah. Well, that's interesting to me. I'm sure
I liked Raheem. Raheem was just known over his head. I thought Raheem, like if Raheem gets a shot as a head coach now, I think he'll have some success. I really do. Okay. I think he's a leader of men. I wanted Dirk because he was the natural guy to replace Lovey, right? To keep that continuity with Doug Martin, with Jameis Winston, keep that offense rolling. It made sense at the time. He got his opportunity. It didn't work out, but Lovey was the worst, and then probably Shiano after that, probably Raheem after that, then Dirk. It's easy. It's
just goes.
It's easier to talk about the good ones, right? I mean, you only have a couple. You got Dungy, you got Gruden, you got Bruce, and you got John McKay back in the day. That's it. 4 good ones.
There you go. Problem solved.
And here's the funny thing that you'll appreciate. You can really say that about the Steelers too. They've only had like 3 really good coaches. The problem is like they've only had like 3 coaches their entire history of the franchise. So.
Yeah, if you don't mess that up, you can have a lot of success, and obviously they've had. But it's hard, man. It's hard to determine what makes a good head coach because you're right. Dirk was I think it was the right call, and it was a good process to getting there. But sometimes it takes way more than just having chemistry, being a good offensive mind, or something like that. Kay wants to know: do you think Celsius could make Ronald Jones a top 15 receiving back? Or is that even too much for the mighty Celsius? Let's talk about Ronald Jones, though, for a little bit here, even though his K jokes around here, but it's been a pretty solid summer for Ronald Jones. I mean, he's caught the ball better than Leonard Fournette for sure in training camp. We have really not seen him in the preseason. He played 2 snaps. So we really don't have anything to go off of for Ronald Jones. And because of that, other topics have kind of risen to the surface of the conversation here. Alex Kappa, OJ Howard, even, the backup quarterback situation, Kyle Trask, Tyler Johnson, Jalen Darden. We've had a lot of those conversations, but Saturday is going to take us back to some of the conversations we had at the beginning of training camp that we've just moved on from because we don't have any sample size to evaluate some of those questions by. And Saturday is going to bring us back to Rojo versus Leonard, but we've already made it. Bruce Arians already made it clear both guys will play, and it doesn't matter, who starts. So I'm not even just concerned with who's going to beat out who on Saturday because I don't think that happens. But what does Rojo look like on Saturday, right? Like, is this a guy who really spent the offseason and did get better as a receiving back, not only in terms of just catching the ball, but knowing where to be, knowing how to run routes, knowing timing, getting his head around, getting his hands up. I mean, remember how Todd McNair talked to us about the fact that he literally just wouldn't lift his hands in time to catch the football? That was a big issue they had to work on. He said that for a couple of years. Have those things improved with Rojo or not? I think it's a huge game Saturday to figure that out.
I agree. And I believe that Ronald Jones will end up being the starting running back sooner rather than later for this team. He's the more talented runner. It seems to me that with Rojo, he's just been very workmanlike with his approach, with his demeanor in training camp. And I think with the last 2 years, he's really had that same demeanor. So I would expect him to be at or near or over 1,000 yards again this season, as long as he stays healthy. I when I look at Rojo, he looks professional out there. And I'm not saying that Leonard Fournette doesn't. But there's a little bit of laissez-faire about Leonard Fournette. A little bit of, I'm playoff Lenny, I'm Lombardi Lenny. And I don't mean that in a negative or derogatory way. It's just that I don't see the attention to details from Leonard Fournette on a consistent basis. And listen, I'm not a coach. I'm not around these guys near as much. We have a window of time during the season for practices. In training camp, like you're trying to watch 90 guys with a pair of eyes. So I'd not studied Leonard Fournette. It just, you get that impression, right? It's not a first impression, but you get that impression just watching someone's demeanor. And listen, that's why scouts, when they go to these college football games, they spend time looking at how they warm up, what they do in pregame warmups, who they talk to, how seriously are they taking the warmups. That's a big thing.
Rojo runs so hard. Like, he just runs every time he gets the ball like a crazy person, and you hope that, the fumbles don't come with it. And again, that part of it, we've never questioned. He's definitely the more talented back between he and Leonard Fournette. It's the question of consistency and not making mistakes. That's what I got a
theory about Rojo, right? Rojo at USC, you saw the college film. So did I.
I loved the college film, by the way. I was very high on him.
He's a breakaway runner. He runs to daylight. The problem is in the NFL, without the wide side of the field where the hashes are, there's no daylight. There's very little daylight, right? I mean, you don't get those 80-yard runs with the regularity that you do in college football, and it's like, you're playing, you're not playing Oregon State, every week. You're playing top-notch NFL caliber players and teams and defenses. So I think that Rojo runs hard and really accelerates, hits the hole hard, because that's the only way you're going to have any crack at daylight. That's the only way you're going to rip off a big run. Big runs in the NFL don't come from tippy-toeing into the hole, being patient, and waiting. You can pick up first downs like that, right? I mean, Le'Veon Bell was a very patient runner, kind of had that running style. But more often than not, if you want touchdowns, if you want long runs, big plays, you got to hit the hole hard, shake off some tackles, get to the second level as fast as you can, try to make somebody miss, try to break another tackle, get to the third level as fast as you can. That's the name of the game in the NFL.
Right. Absolutely true. Good question from Harvinder here. I don't want to detour too long, but there's usually a player who nobody saw having a great year. Who might that be for the Bucs this year? We will talk a little bit more about this as we get through the final cuts, look at the final roster, and then start looking ahead to week 1 of the season. We'll go through some of these kind of superlative type questions, but just now off the top of your head, I mean, as Harvinder asked, who might that be for the Bucs that could have a great year that nobody really saw coming? I don't know who people see coming or not. I don't want to,
Right.
jump to any clues because everybody has, be like, oh, everybody expects that person. But I mean, I think Sean Murphy-Bunting has had that ability. Like, it's about putting it together. But like, if you look at what he did in the playoffs last year, it was a sign that some things had clicked in. We know he battled injuries. I'm a little bit hesitant to say that he'll be that caliber of player that we saw in the playoffs, but yeah, I mean, in the practice, he's been much better. Clearly, I don't think there's any question he's been much better this summer. I mean, we have not seen Sean Murphy-Bunting really torched up in any part of practice. Now, they don't do a lot of one-on-ones, wide receivers, DBs, but in the team sessions, even when he's given up a catch, he's been right there. He contests. He's not been completely out of position or anything like that. Like last year, we saw happen so often. I worry about him because I don't think he's a natural slot corner, and they put him in that situation obviously a lot. I wonder what would happen if he were just an outside corner, but he's a guy that I think could have a breakout year that would sneak up on some people.
Yeah, injuries really kind of derailed him last year and hampered him a little bit and caused him to get beat. I think that affected his confidence. So it was a little bit of a domino effect, right? With the injuries hit, then your confidence goes down, then you're just not playing well.
And they need to play more press man for him too. I think that helps him a lot.
Yeah, the closer he is to the guy, the better. And we saw that in New Orleans, John, when he played in the slot, picked off that pass that was intended for Michael Thomas, and almost scored a touchdown on it. So I think that, yes, the closer he is to the guy he's defending, the better. I would say, there's, in my opinion, there's a separation between Sean Murphy-Bunting and Jamel Dean. I think Jamel Dean has had an okay camp. I'm not knocking Jamel Dean, but it seems to me that Carlton Davis, clear number 1, Sean Murphy-Bunting, clear number 2, and Jamel Dean, clear number 3. And you'd love to see, because back in the day, you had Rondé Barber and Brian Kelly, and either Donnie Abraham or Rondé Barber, Brian Kelly, and Dwight Smith. There was a time when those 3 guys were Rondé was the alpha, but those 3 guys were kind of closer. And I think you'd like to see this year a little bit more of a closer type of feeling from those guys, that there's not much difference between Carlton Davis and Sean Murphy-Bunting, and there's not much difference between Jamel Dean and Sean Murphy-Bunting. Yeah. And hopefully that's the case, because the only thing that's going to create that is time and experience. And I think that's the beauty of having these 3 guys play together for 3 years now, is they have that chemistry and the ability to kind of congeal as a unit. And I'd like to see the growth continue. I think it will.
Yeah, that's going to be huge for the secondary. And that brings me to kind of one of the other things I wanted to touch on, and I want really your thoughts on too here. But to me, the one battle we've talked about a lot is Leonard Rojo, but I don't know if that one's even going to matter. We've talked a little bit more recently about Kappa Stinney. I think it's still Kappa's to lose. I'd still be surprised if Kappa's not the week 1 starter, and we'll see kind of how things play out in that last preseason game. Something to watch for sure. But what about Mike Edwards and Jordan Whitehead? Like, if Mike Edwards starts on Saturday and plays great, and Jordan Whitehead misses another game, at what point? I mean, Jordan Whitehead has played his best football over the past year,
Yes.
So you don't want to take anything away from him.
Right.
But Mike Edwards has had a great camp, and he was probably looked like one of their best players in the first preseason game. How do you keep him off the field? What are you going to do? Like, it's hard.
Mike Edwards has been the best safety in camp. It doesn't mean he's the best safety on the team, but in terms of making plays, he's had the best camp, and that includes Antoine Winfield Jr. as well. It's just that Antoine Winfield is a hell of a safety. He's going to start.
He's looked really good the last week too, because he's jumped a bunch of routes. Yeah. So
and I think you're talking about a guy with Pro Bowl potential there. And again, not knocking Whitehead. The problem is for guys like Jordan Whitehead and guys like Scotty Miller. There, you've got some replacements already on deck, right? Jalen Darden eventually for Scotty Miller, Mike Edwards for Jordan Whitehead. And you're going to have to start prioritizing, because you whipped out the credit card now. You're paying cash before, but now your salary cap, you've whipped out the credit card to keep this team together, to extend Brady and bring back Gronk for a year, franchise Chris Godwin. So that the problem is you're going to have to, pay Godwin a king's ransom after the franchise tag comes up. You got to make a decision on O.J. Howard and Rob Gronkowski too. Maybe one or both those guys don't come back. but you're
Right.
going to have Carlton Davis on deck. You've got Devin White coming up. You got Vita Vea on deck. You got a lot of guys that are big-time starting caliber players. And I'm not saying Jordan Whitehead is not a very good starter, but if you're asking me, where does he rank on the totem pole after those guys, he's down the list, especially when you have a guy like Mike Edwards that can fill in as a starter and I think play just as good in some areas, maybe not as good in run support, but maybe better as a ball hawking safety.
It makes me wish that the Bucs were more willing to try Antoine Winfield in the slot. I would be more dogmatic about this, Scott, if I knew Winfield could ball in the slot. Like if we'd seen evidence of this, we have not really seen.
You mean as a
evidence
slot
of it.
corner, right?
I mean as a slot corner, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
So having
Anytime
Sean
they'd
Murphy
be a
Bunting
nickel.
outside, bring Antoine Winfield down as the nickel slot corner, right?
Yes. And Jamel Dean would be off the field. He'd be your backup outside corner. And you
Right.
put Sean Murphy Bunting, you avoid putting him in situations where he's not been as good. But at the same time, I don't know if Antoine Winfield can do that. I just don't know. I know in college he did it occasionally and was good at it, but that's slot in college is like you're always getting the worst receiver. Like I don't know who's out there. Slot in the NFL, you see a number one after. I mean, you're going to put Julio Jones is going in the slot, Mike Evans is going in the slot these days.
Right.
Godwin, you think about the guys that are playing there. So it's just a totally different world.
Right.
And I don't know whether he can play
you know
that.
What? I think that's why they like Sean Murphy Bunting at 6 feet tall in the slot to go up against those bigger receivers.
Right. And that might be the case. And maybe Winfield, I mean, he's built, but obviously he's not the biggest safety. So maybe that's why he isn't there. I would just like to see it because at least in certain games, right, where that a team isn't, they're going to play their tight end in the slot. Okay, can Winfield hang with somebody like that? You know what I mean? Athletically, can he just dominate that type of a matchup?
Right.
I wonder about those things because if they could, and if Mike Edwards could play in free safety and you could keep Jordan Whitehead on the field, it would be having, in my opinion, your most talented players on the field. Whether they be great in those roles or not remains to be seen. Yeah. I'd just be curious about it. But it is hard for me to – I mean, Mike Edwards played 188 snaps last year.
Tampa Buck really disagreeing with you on this take. But David has a question. I want to get your thoughts on this.
Which part of the take? I didn't –
he says that Winfield's too small.
Yeah. Oh, too small. Yeah, I mean, he might be, but I would just like to see him not succeed in that role rather than write him off before we – even try it there. Plus, it wouldn't just be him in coverage. It would also be the blitz ability that you bring from the slot.
And he can do that.
Another dimension. Because they don't blitz the slot a whole lot. Right. So off the edge and they can walk him down in the box and blitz, sure. But there's another dimension when you can blitz from the slot too. So it add an element to the rush packages. David says, I remember the only knock on Edwards before last year was his tackling. Is that any better? Yes, he improved it a lot last year. It was only 188 snaps last year compared to like 652 or something the year before.
Right.
So you have to keep the sample size in mind. But Mike Edwards tackled very well last year. I think he only missed like 2 tackles really, and they weren't bad misses by any stretch of the imagination. What's crazy about Edwards is that in 188 snaps, not all of which were even passes. I forget how many were even passes.
Yeah.
But he intercepted 3 passes. 2 of them counted. One was taken back because Shaq Barrett was barely offside, I think.
Right.
Maybe it was a bad call. I don't even remember. And then he broke up 5 passes. The Raiders game, yes.
Yeah.
And then he broke up 5 passes. I mean, Winfield broke up 6 all year, and he played every defensive snap. Right. Like over 1,000 snaps. And so
it's what you call being an impactful player, John.
It's hard to write that off, Scott. Ball production, especially the way Mike Edwards got it. Then he adds another pick and 3 more pass breakups in the playoffs. He did play a little bit more in the playoffs, but still we're talking about a small sample size of snaps. He deflected the ball that Antoine Winfield picked off that basically sealed the Super Bowl in the third quarter. That was basically a wrap at that point. I mean, he was the guy that made plays all over the field. He finished off the Saints game. It's hard to take that off the field, especially
he picked up Drew Brees' last NFL pass.
Like
that's
the guy
sweet,
can
man.
play,
That's
like
sweet.
Right. And if he's improved as a tackler, which it looks like he has, he's always been physical. He's always been aggressive. Same thing we see in games with Mike Edwards, we see in practice. He drives on the ball, he anticipates routes, he makes plays. Jordan Whitehead has gotten so much better across the board. He's a great blitzer. He's a great run defender. He's probably the best tackler on the defense in terms of consistency. But it's just hard to take ball production off the field. It's that important.
Well, I mean, you're preaching to the choir, Tampa Buck. The reason we're talking about 3 safety packages this year, that's the thing. Is like they're looking at doing some 3 safety packages. And John's been pining for it since really the beginning of last year. And, and I think it's coming to fruition.
The moment I saw Mike Edwards pick off a pass against the Broncos, it was. And I was
that was a fantastic interception.
This is the guy we're getting right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to be a part of what they do. It was obviously a part of what they did in the Super Bowl. 12 snaps with 3 safeties in the field in the Super Bowl, way more than any other game the whole year. Like maybe more than the whole year combined in terms of number of snaps. And it obviously worked really well. I'm not saying it's the way to go every game, every matchup, obviously, but there will be times where it needs to be a part of what they do. And I'm excited.
I think it will be because, and I did this piece in SR's Fab 5 about the sacks, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like we kind of have this idea that Todd Bowles has been a defensive coordinator for like a decade in the NFL. This is his 5th year as a defensive coordinator. He had 2 years in Arizona. Then he got hired to be the Jets coach, and he turned those duties over to Casey Rogers, who's the Bucs defensive line coach. Results weren't that great. Did Todd Bowles have some influence in the defense? Yes. Was he calling the plays? No, he was not. It was Casey Rogers' job. Mm-hmm. But then he comes back to Tampa, and this is year 3. So Todd Bowles has only been doing this really for 5 years at the NFL level. He's still new. He's still learning. He's still opening his mind. And you love to see the growth, especially by him doing the right thing and picking up where he left off against the Chiefs with that cover 2 defense. We saw that at the from quarters 2, 3, and 4 after getting shellacked 17-0 in the first Chiefs game, week 12. Mm-hmm. Then he's picked up right where he left off in the Super Bowl, ran that, it kept him out of the end zone. I mean, that's great growth from your defensive coordinator, and that's something you and I were screaming about on this podcast in the weeks leading up to the weeks leading to the Super Bowl. Run cover 2, stop these guys that way, and he sure did. Of course, he didn't need our help. He knew what to do, and he did it.
Right. Once you start playing 2 high safeties, especially against a team that was giving up, the Bucs were thrown against more in neutral situations than any other team in the league last year. You have this reputation as an elite run stuffing defense 2 years in a row now.
Yeah.
Watching people try to run on them when anybody who's going to play for this defense in 2021 has been out there in the preseason has been comical. I mean, the first 5 runs for the Titans the other day? A great rushing team.
Oh, yeah, that's the bread and butter.
They were tackled for a loss on all 5 carries.
Pat O'Connor.
Right. It wasn't until the back, they
Raheem Nunez-Roches.
Right. It's just like everybody can play the run. It's crazy. Yeah. Kevin Minter, the corners are exceptional. It's so, they have a culture there. But guess what? If you can be thrown against less or give up less in the passing game and be the 3rd best run defense or the 5th best run defense, you're going to be a better defense because everybody's going to attack you that way. And that's the way you don't want to get attacked in the NFL, is by having people just throw against you all the time. And that's what's happened to the Bucs at some points last season. So when they said, we know the Chiefs are going to come out and just throw it a million times against us, let's just play too high and give them a light box. And if they want to run it, let them. So that was what won the game. And we'll see if they use 3 safeties in that regard again this season. Hey, Spotify Green Room is changing the game themselves, Scott. That's a social audio app that's changing the way we talk about sports. There are rooms in there you can jump in if you get the Spotify Green Room app. You can jump in. You can talk about your favorite teams, your favorite sports. A lot going on in the NBA world on there if you're into the NBA like myself, but also the NFL world is expanding fast on there. We've got great Bucs chats going on in there, and we'll be hosting shows in there throughout the season. So if you want to get invited to those, download the Spotify Green Room app and follow Pewter Report on there, and you'll get invited when we go live on Spotify Green Room. You'll get invited to all of our shows. It will be a great time. So make sure you're tuned in there, because as the season approaches, we'll be doing more and more with Spotify Green Room. So we're very, very excited about that. All right, Scott, we have talked about some of these matchups that we're going to be having our eye on, but I want to float a trade scenario at you. Right. It's that segment. It's that time. So you might have seen, Scott, that Sony Michel got traded today.
Did see that, yes.
I don't know how this is possible, but he got traded from the Patriots despite being on their roster bubble. I don't think it was super optimistic that he was going to make that team, and he gets traded, and the Rams give up a 4th-round pick for him. Technically, it's if they get a comp pick, but they're supposed to get a comp pick right now. So if they get a comp pick, what is 5th and 6th right now will become a 4th-round comp pick. So it's obviously at the end of the 4th round. But this brings me to my question for you. if you had asked me 24 hours ago, will Sony Michel get traded for a 4th-round pick this offseason, I would have died laughing. Sony Michel has not done very much at all in his recent NFL career. He looks athletically zapped from the time he really entered the league. There were the knee concerns coming out. There were knee concerns right away in New England. He is a smart runner. He has great vision. He is tough, but he does not break tackles, and he is not an accelerator. So, and he doesn't offer you much in the passing game. You are talking about a guy who probably wasn't going to make it or be a factor for New England, gets traded for a 4th. So I say all this to say to you, Scott, if you told me that, I would have laughed. If you told me Leonard Fournette would get traded for a 4th-round pick, I would have laughed. Now I am reevaluating my entire life because someone was dumb enough. And I know it's a late 4th, but that's where the Bucs are going to be picking, probably in the 4th round. And so is this possible, Scott? If a team, I know we don't think the Bucs are going to trade people. They value the depth. We've said that over and over again. But a 4th-round pick, a 4th-round pick got you Gronk. A 4th-round pick gave you the ability to jump up and get Tristan Wirfs. Yeah. That's nothing to sneeze at here. If you got offered that for Leonard Fournette, let's say he goes off and plays great against the Texans. I don't know how long he'll play. Right. Obviously, the Texans are a joke, but if he does, and there's interest.
So you're talking about Leonard Fournette. So you're anticipating that Ronald Jones is the starting running back. Is that what you're anticipating?
I'm not anticipating that it'll even matter who's a starter, but let's say we get a couple weeks into the season and Rojo's looking great and he's playing well. And obviously Giovanni Bernard's doing his thing. Everybody knows. And Keyshawn Vaughn's, Bruce says he has all the faith in the world in Keyshawn Vaughn. Well, maybe put your money where your mouth is. And, you can, Leonard Fournette's your 3rd best running back. They just think in week 3, they're thinking he might be your 3rd best guy. It's not crazy. He was a healthy scratch in week 14 last year. So, it's not like that would be that big of a deviation from where they were at not that long ago. But if it happens and you can get a 4th for him out there, another team's had an injury. How many injuries of running backs do we see early in the season? Constantly. And you get a 4th for Leonard.
It's going to happen. Don't think it's going to happen. Not this year.
But do you?
But would I? Yes, I would. Yes, I would. But I'm not Jason Light. Jason Light's not going to do it
for a 4th, though. Scott. Nope. We're not talking about a 5th or a 6th.
Nope, not this year. Not this year, because they needed Lenny when Ronald Jones couldn't go. That's why.
You're probably right. You're probably right that it won't happen.
And I'd rather have Lenny run the ball than Keyshawn Vaughn. Too many unknowns. Have not seen enough good things from him yet.
Me too.
I'm sorry. Here's what I want to see. I would like to see, because they're not going to run the ball during the season. We know that. And when they do, it's not going to be pretty. I would like to see them really run the ball and commit to it. And half of the snaps that they end up having in the first half, if it's 30, 40 snaps, whatever it is, 25, however many snaps they have, I want to see them run the ball at least 50 to 60% of the time. And really commit to it with the starters, with the tight ends, because I think you got to evaluate, can O.J. Howard run block, or is he still worried about the Achilles? Can the running backs bang it in there, create some yards? That's the one thing that I think has been neglected in training camp. Now, they did get some work against the Titans, but still, even in the joint practices, you're not getting tackled to the ground. It's not the same as it is during the games. So in my opinion, I would like to see them run the ball a lot, because they're not going to during the season. But they're going to need to at some points in time. You're going to have to pick up 3rd and 2s, because 3rd and 2, John, is a rundown. And you're going to have to salt away the game sometimes when you have a lead. And you need that running game to keep the clock moving and keep the chains moving and get timeouts burned. So it's still going to be an important part of the game. It's just not going to be the focal point of this offense. But I'd like to see them have some confidence in doing it, because right now, 1.7 yards per carry, 1.2 yards per carry in the last 2 games, and I know the starters haven't been in there, but still, when Byron Leftwich calls a run play, neither he nor the running back nor the offensive line is thinking 1.7 yards or 1.2 yards. That's not supposed to happen. It's supposed to be 3 or 4 yards or more, and it's not happened. So I'd like to see it happen with the starters.
Oh, it's been pitiful for sure. No question about that. We've talked about the schematic things that need to change. You also need the guys to block better for sure, but there's just not a lot of space. So, I think that the whole conversation, again, there's Gio here now, and there's Rojo, who, if he's playing, again, the conversation starts with Rojo's playing really well to open the season.
Yeah.
And Vaughn is grown, even though he'd still be the RB3. And you have a team that like is going to run the ball near the bottom of the league, like in terms of volume of carries. Like they're not going to be one of the top rushing team in the league. So there isn't as much onus on this maybe as other teams would be if something were to happen. I see your point. I guess what you're saying is Jason Light's point that the depth really matters this year for sure. But man, a fourth for Leonard. Now I will say this too. The Rams carelessness when it comes to draft picks might just be their own. Like, I don't know that you'd have a bunch of teams lining up. I don't know if you'd have any other teams lining up to give a fourth for
I could see that.
There's some dumb teams. I mean, that was a really idiotic trade by the Rams. Like, that was desperation at a position that just doesn't move the needle that much for a guy that has not moved the needle at all since he got in the league.
Yeah. I would say if I had a better feel for Keyshawn Vaughn, then I would feel more comfortable doing that. Now, Bucs Time 12 says trade OJ. Now, that's the thing. If the Bucs get enough of a look at OJ in training camp and in the preseason games and feel like they're not going to re-sign him at the end of this year, and that Cam Brate is going to be tight end too, then maybe you keep Tanner Hudson and you go 4 tight ends and you keep OJ around for a little bit. Then when a tight end needy team needs him, then you go ahead and pull the trigger, because you might not be able to afford OJ, or maybe you will because he's not going to be productive.
To me, you're never going to get the payoff of what he could be if he hits for your team. Also, like if let's say just Gronk gets hurt, happened many times before, and OJ has like a 600-yard season, replicates what Gronk did last year. The NFL is starved at the tight end position.
It is. I don't necessarily agree with Matt. I think that he does have some value. It's not very much right now,
though, coming off a torn Achilles.
It's not much.
Game season.
But I think you could trade him given his draft status, given the tape he's put out there when healthy.
1 year of control on that contract if you're the team. Now, you might be able to thinking if you acquire him, you can get him back pretty easy because he probably doesn't go off. But I just think if he goes off and gets a good contract and you don't want to bring him back because you're bringing back Gronk and you got Brate around, you could get a nice comp pick. Like, you probably could get a better comp pick than you could.
Probably could.
So there's layers to it. He's a tricky one. It's not going to happen, but I don't think he's going to get traded at all. But
all right, see, here's the problem. But Michael, we've seen this too. Flash Gordon, go ahead and put him on IR. You can't do that because he's still going to be a free agent at the end of the year, whether he's on IR or not. And the problem is they've given him
that's the problem. He's maybe I said he's healthy. He doesn't belong on
he's healthy, but the thing is well, let's say he were to get injured or whatever. At some point in time, you've got to punt on a guy if he can't stay healthy, and that's been a problem with his. It's not his fault. Injuries aren't his fault, but
you have to move on after the
season.
Can't
up the club in the tub.
Right. I mean, logically, you can't IR him right now because if you had to IR him right now, season would be over. So you don't want that if the guy's not actually hurt. So he just needs to keep playing, check off the rust, and we'll see what the ceiling is for him this season. Obviously, right now, expectations are probably lower than they were going into last year, where everybody was raving about him, and he started off really well. To his credit,
he had a great start, great training camp. I mean, the arrow was pointing up. Right now, you can just see that he's not right,
not the same
in terms of the mental part of the game.
Right. There's a lot of layers to it. There really is. And we've seen so many tight ends. It seems like, especially like Evan Ingram was another guy, incredibly talented.
Yes.
But it just seems like the mistakes pile up. And Jared Cook early in his career, I've said OJ Howard could have like a Jared Cook, late career, just kind of
resurgence.
Off, right. Yeah. Because Jared Cook for years was so frustrating. Couldn't block anybody and dropped the ball all the time and got beat up. And then,
we're not hating on OJ.
Why do we get these questions?
We're not hating on him. We're
hating.
We're simply stating, calling like we see it. I mean,
an elite weapon. I don't know if he'll be an elite weapon, Lobello. I don't think it's hating to say he might not be elite. I mean, there are probably 4 tight ends in the league I would call elite.
Right.
3 maybe. Like that just, I don't think that's hating. If that. Anyway. Okay. Always get accused of hating. Oh my gosh.
John Hate Yard.
Hate Yard.
That's your new name.
All right. So we've talked about some of the things we need to see from the Bucs offense, but quietly, Scott, I think that Bucs defensively are to me, in some ways, the more interesting. Bucs don't do well offensively, I think it's going to come down to like things they did to themselves. Like I think that's where it's going. I mean, I've looked at the Texans. I mean, just do me a favor, Scott. Just pull up the Texans depth chart while I got
all right.
here. Like, just pull it up and take a look at the guys on this depth chart.
Do I have to? I heard it's scary.
Yeah, you have to. And it's not even that every position is horrible, but there is not a player on the Texans except for Laramie Tunsil, who's on the COVID list right now and probably will not play Saturday. That would start for the Bucs. There's not a player on there.
Tyrod Taylor, Philip Lindsay, Brandon Cooks, Chris Connolly, Kiki Kuti, Jordan Akins, Paul Quisenberry, Max Sharping. I liked Max coming out of Northern Illinois.
He's okay.
Justin Britt, Justin McCray, and Titus Howard. That's the offense. Defensively, Whitney Merciless. Isn't he like 40 years old?
He's old and he's a lot of injuries.
Malik Collins, Vincent Taylor, Jordan Jenkins, Zach Cunningham, Christian Kirksey, Kevin Pierre-Louis, Bradley Roby, who's suspended, Eric Murray, Justin Reed, Terrence Mitchell.
Their best defensive player is Justin Reed, and he wouldn't play over Winfield. And
correct.
I mean, Zach Cunningham got the big contract, and he missed more tackles than anybody in the league last year. Which is
there's
hard to
there's nobody outside of like you make the case for Tunsil that has got the talent of any Buccaneer starter in this team. You're correct.
I mean, so Saturday needs to be biblical. Like Saturday needs to be like Old Testament
Detroit
style.
Lions, right? Old Testament, exactly. Like Detroit Lions, 47-7. Beat down. That's what needs to happen. Yes,
and it is about the scoreboard, I guess, but like more than anything, they need to like come out of the first half being like, wow, like we just put a hurt.
It should be like 24-0 at the end of the first half.
It should be overwhelming on the field and overwhelming on the scoreboard. You should come out of that knowing, hey, we didn't beat ourselves, and when we don't beat ourselves, we're up 24-0 at the half on a team that's the worst team in the league. Like, it's not about like, oh, now that we beat the Texans, we know we'll be Super Bowl bound or we're that kind of team. They should already know that, but it should be like we're ready for week one. Like, we can thump the worst. We're ready for week one. Now, if you go out here, think about the first drive of the game. Antonio Brown drop pass. They blow the protection, give up the sack. Sure. Okay, it's self-inflicted stuff, like whatever, but it's stuff that can be fixed. Then you come out in the second game, and you got the drop third down pass to O.J. Howard that goes like he bobbles it off his helmet. And
Which one? There was like two of them.
The first drive with Blaine. And then you come back the second drive, and he's got the dig or the like in-breaking route to Darden that he drops like low pass, but he drops off his chest. And that kills that drive. Then you come back on the next drive, and you got the seam shot to Howard that would have put you probably in field goal range, very close to it, and that's dropped. So you got those are the first three drives of the second game, and then you have the first drive, where you're out there with the starters in the first game that they drop a huge pass, AB drops, that never happens, and then Blaine came down in that game and scored on their next drive. So honestly, everything with the first and second team offense has basically been self-inflicted. Like,
no doubt,
it's been stuff they've done to themselves. You gotta eliminate that going into.
I feel bad for Blaine Gabbert because God, I mean, he's still the Bucs leading quarterback in terms of quarterback rating in the preseason. I'd like for that to change. I'd like for Tom to overtake him. Let's hope that happens. But at the same time, I mean, Blaine, he could be looking at a QBR number like in the hundreds.
I'm not even going to entertain you.
I'm just saying. I mean, catch the ball.
He's been great. I mean, I put him in the winners. I put him in the most impressive. Yeah, I mean, he was great. And so that's what has to happen on offense. I digress there. But defensively, Scott, this team.
Let's talk
obviously,
some defense, please.
like this is – I kind of think like they played really well in the preseason on defense, like especially guys who will actually be on the roster. Like they really have played well. Like there hasn't been any, they haven't given up. The guys who will be on this roster, the first and second team defense have not given up any pass plays of 20 yards or more in the air.
I would say if there's been one disappointing aspect, it's really been the lack of sacks. I think that's probably been the biggest thing. There was
that was a little bit better last week. Right?
It was a little bit better. Yes.
Shoyinka got one and O'Connor got one.
Right.
And Khalil Davis got one for Grant Stewart. And
that's true.
So there was a couple of those too. So, but the hard thing is the Bengals threw the ball in like 1 second. So
that's true. Yeah, they've got a short rhythmic passing, very much like the Rams. I mean,
Tyrod Taylor will not play that way.
That's correct. He will hold the ball and he'll try to run around. And I'd like to see this game look like the Super Bowl where Tyrod Taylor is imitating a very bad Patrick Mahomes, and because you can't imitate a very good Patrick Mahomes, there's only one of those. He plays for the Chiefs. But I would like to see the pass rush really come to life. And I wrote about this in the Pewter Report Roundtable, John. I want to see Shaq Barrett kind of go off because he's had a quiet camp.
Great point.
And that's not necessarily his fault. He has been primarily playing left outside linebacker, going up against Tristan Wirfs. So you don't want to see Shaq Barrett get off on Tristan Wirfs because Tristan Wirfs is the guy protecting Tom Brady's front side.
Right.
So when they do good on good, which is a lot, he really is holding Barrett at bay, and that's a good thing because those are two Pro Bowl caliber players going at it. Now, what I want to see is when that, when he goes up against Tyus Howard, I want to see Barrett school Howard and really get to the quarterback and kind of pick up where he left off from the Super Bowl. And I think that's going to happen. I think that Barrett's going to be going because the guys we talked about, Jason Pierre-Paul, who has had a fantastic training camp with the knee surgery, moving around a lot better. You can see that playing with more confidence, a little bit more agile and quick. Joe Tryon has been as good as advertised. We're not blowing smoke. I think the fans have seen it. We see it every day in practice. Joe Tryon is going to be a star in this league. He is only going to get better. And, man, he has got Larry Foote coaching him. He is learning from Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul. They have got to find in this guy.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
With Tryon and JPP have had the headlines. I want to see Shaq Barrett and that $17 million guy really kind of assert himself, and I think he's going to. Yeah,
I agree with you. Those are all good names to watch defensively. I want to see Devin White continue to evolve and grow. No question there. It's now about coverage. Can that continue to happen? I think in practice, it's been so much better. He's looked so good in that regard that I'm just kind of excited to see him in the game. Got suckered in by a fake in the first preseason game and kind of gave up a little bit of a bubble, but that's not really a coverage thing. It's more of a read thing. So I want to see that part of his game continue.
I don't know what it is, but the Buccaneers, whether it's defensive ends or outside linebackers, in their history have always had problems with bootlegs, always getting sucked in down the line. And it's like, I remember coaching my guys at Pop Warner, and I said, if you just stay home, it's the easiest sack you'll get because the quarterback will literally turn his back with the play action and run right into you.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand at the NFL level why that happens so much. And it's not just the Bucs, but it's always been the Bucs for some reason. It's so maddening as a guy who loves defensive line like I do that you see these guys get sucked right down the line of scrimmage. When you've got another guy in the gap, it's not like there's going to be a huge hole if you just park it right there and read the quarterback and keep your contain. But you always see that the guy goes right down the line and the quarterback is wide open for a boot run or boot pass. It's just maddening.
Absolutely. You know what isn't maddening, Scott?
Tell me,
John.
You
know what isn't maddening? Our friends over at Living Golf Life. They're the best of the best. They're great guys. Check out livinggolflife.com to see all the accessories that they've kind of created for golfers out there. Some really fun, really good stuff. Their polos are awesome. Their hats are absolutely killer. If I do say so myself, I think they're awesome. They've got koozies, they've got glasses, they've got all kinds of stuff over at livinggolflife.com. Great designs, great people. They've started this company because they really believe golfing should just be a lifestyle. The way that guys hang out on the course and have a couple beers and things like that. That's what they're all about. They're not about necessarily dominating at golf. They're about the lifestyle that is golf, and they've created a bunch of accessories and an awesome website to kind of exemplify that. So check out livinggolflife.com. See what these guys have created, get some gifts, ask for some gifts for yourself, get some gifts for yourself, and give some gifts to other people as well.
What I like about their look and kind of the brand they're going for is they're promoting golf, right? It's like so much stuff when you go, and I'm an amateur, average golfer. I don't golf nearly as often as I want to or should. But it's Callaway, Titleist, Nike. It's all brand stuff, and you're promoting brands, and I get that. But it's like Golf Life promotes golf. They have golf in their name, and so I think that's the cool thing about it is they, they're talking about what they're promoting, and they're promoting what they're talking about. Golf Life. It's that simple.
Right. It really is. You know what else is simple, Scott? Well, it's not that simple to pull off, but it's going to look simple to everybody else maybe in terms of the way we execute it. But Pewter Game Day is coming
That's
this
right.
Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, when the Bucs play the Texans and the starters play what Bruce Arians has said will be the first half. Pewter Report will be live, a live in-game stream, an in-game commentary and analysis on the game from myself, other Pewter reporters, and other special guests as well. We'll have expert analysis, injury updates for you on each play as it happens. Report.com. It'll be through our YouTube channel, but we ask that you go over to PewterReport.com, watch it there if you can. Obviously, if you're not subscribed to the Pewter Report YouTube channel, please do that. Hit that bell for notifications when we go live. But if you can, watch Saturday's broadcast live on PewterReport.com while you're watching the game. We would love it, man. And we'll obviously have the Pewter Report post-game podcast 1 hour later after following the end of the game, as we always do, and that will be a good time as it always is on the show. But yeah, we're going to have live in-game commentary and analysis, something we're hoping to do more of throughout the season. And so we appreciate y'all's support on this, obviously, but it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of thoughts on it. I know one common question I did want to address is, will we be kind of ahead of what you're watching? I don't think so. More than likely, if you have cable, you'll probably be a little bit ahead of us. So you'll hear the commentary a little bit after the play. So it might line up kind of perfectly for you. If not, I'll be watching probably on like YouTube TV. And so I'll probably be behind you based on what I've typically seen.
We're talking about like a second or two. We're not,
yes.
It's not going to be annoying.
Right. We won't be ruining what's about to happen for you. Let's
right.
put it that way. I don't think that'll be happening. So that's one part that's good about it. But also we're going to be learning as we kind of do this a little bit as to what this process is like. So we definitely ask for your grace during that process a little bit. But now, it's going to be a fun time.
I was on with Matt Matera yesterday, and he had a great kind of analogy, because the thing is you got to watch the game at home or on your phone or your computer or at a sports bar, whatever. And then you can also watch us provide that commentary, and we can say, oh yeah, this is something they ran in training camp. We've seen this, we can provide some depth and analysis to what you're watching, because let's face it, as good as the broadcast guys are, they pop in town, they talk to the coaches, the players for an hour, and they watch some film, and that's it. We're dialed into what the Bucs are doing. So I think it's going to be fun. Matt Matera said, if you like our draft show, right, because we're watching the draft with you guys, but we're commenting on all the picks, we're speculating on who might be taken next, who the Bucs are looking at. It's the same type of thing. It's like the draft show version of game day. That's why we call it Pewter Game Day.
All Bucs focused then.
That's right. No doubt about it.
Yeah, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
We appreciate you guys helping us get over 5,000. Now we're on to 10,000, and it starts with you guys out there. Mm-hmm. If you haven't subscribed to our Pewter Report TV YouTube channel yet, please do so. It takes a second. It's free. It's easy. Click subscribe, and like John said, once you do that, click on notifications. Sometimes we do some nighttime podcasts, depending on schedules and guests, etc. And because the post-game podcast typically starts 45 minutes to an hour after the game, we typically start that right after the coach and the player press conferences end. So because that doesn't have a set time, you want to, or I should say a set start time, you want to hit notifications, because you'll get that notification when we go live.
Absolutely. It's going to be good stuff. We'll be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern. We're excited about that show. Got some guests coming in for you guys, hopefully. Fingers crossed. It should be a good show tomorrow on the Pewter Report podcast, 4 p.m. Eastern. And then, of course, like I said, after that live in-game stream that we've got running on Saturday, we'll have the post-game podcast, as we always do, breaking everything down as the Bucs wrap up the preseason. We'll have our final thoughts on what we think the roster is going to look like before we find out on Sunday and Monday what that final 53-man group will be for the Bucs this season. So until then, thanks so much for listening to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.